They come seeking the secrets of power, these men who confuse noise with authority, who mistake movement for progress. But they understand nothing. Sit. Listen closely. What I will tell them now will either transform their comprehension completely, or be forgotten before they leave this room. Power is not what they imagine it to be. It is not the expensive watch on their wrist, though time commands respect from those who waste it. It is not the corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows, though elevation provides perspective others lack. It is not the fleet of black cars waiting outside, though mobility grants advantages the stationary cannot possess. These are merely the shadows cast by power, not the source of light itself. True power begins in silence, grows in darkness, and reveals itself only when revelation serves a purpose. It moves through channels that official organizational charts never document. It flows along pathways that legal contracts cannot define. It operates according to rules that business schools never teach and law schools never acknowledge. They study power in universities, these academic minds who believe understanding comes from textbooks and case studies. But power cannot be learned from books any more than swimming can be mastered in a library. It must be lived, breathed, experienced in circumstances where consequences are real and mistakes are permanent. The first lesson they must learn is this: people are not what they appear to be. Every smile conceals calculations. Every handshake communicates intentions. Every conversation contains multiple levels of meaning that only the trained ear can detect. The surface interaction is theater. The real communication happens in subtleties that amateurs miss entirely. Watch their eyes when they speak. Listen to what they do not say. Notice which topics they avoid and which subjects make them uncomfortable. These gaps and hesitations reveal more truth than any direct statement they might offer. Most people live their entire lives without recognizing these deeper currents of human interaction. They take words at face value, accept explanations as complete truth, believe that people's stated motivations represent their actual motivations. This naivety makes them predictable, controllable, useful, but dangerous. People understand that every human being operates on multiple levels simultaneously. The conscious mind presents rational explanations for decisions made by unconscious processes. The public persona conceals private agendas. The stated position camouflages hidden interests. Learning to navigate these layers requires patience that most people lack and discipline that few can maintain. It demands the ability to suspend judgment while gathering information, to appear sympathetic while remaining analytical, to seem trusting while staying vigilant. This skill develops slowly, through years of careful observation and painful mistakes. Each encounter teaches lessons about human nature that cannot be learned any other way. Each betrayal reveals patterns of behavior that repeat themselves across different people and situations. Each alliance demonstrates the difference between genuine loyalty and temporary convenience. Eventually, for those with sufficient intelligence and persistence, these individual lessons combine into broader understanding. The recognition that human behavior follows predictable patterns. The realization that people's responses to specific stimuli can be calculated with mathematical precision. The discovery that influence can be exercised without detection when properly applied. This knowledge transforms everything. Conversations become chess games where every move has been calculated several steps in advance. Negotiations become exercises in applied psychology where outcomes are determined before discussions begin. Relationships become strategic alliances designed to serve long-term objectives that others cannot perceive, but knowledge without wisdom is dangerous to everyone, including those who possess it. Raw understanding of human psychology can be used destructively, creating short-term advantages that generate long-term enemies. Crude manipulation techniques produce temporary compliance that eventually transforms into permanent resistance. True mastery requires something more sophisticated, the ability to align your interests with other people's interests so completely that serving you becomes indistinguishable from serving themselves. This creates the strongest possible foundation for influence because people protect what benefits them and destroy what harms them. When your success becomes their success, they will work to ensure your success. When your failure becomes their failure, they will prevent your failure. When your objectives become their objectives, they will pursue your objectives with the same intensity they pursue their own. This alignment cannot be faked or forced. It must be genuine, built on mutual benefit that extends over time and across multiple areas of interaction. People sense the difference between someone who wants to use them and someone whose interests genuinely coincide with theirs. Creating this alignment requires deep understanding of what people actually want versus what they say they want. Most individuals are driven by needs they do not acknowledge, motivated by fears they refuse to admit, limited by beliefs they have never examined consciously. Security competes with excitement. Recognition competes with privacy. Control competes with freedom. Independence competes with belonging. These internal conflicts create opportunities for those who understand how to address multiple needs simultaneously. The sophisticated practitioner presents every proposal as a solution to several problems at once. They demonstrate how one course of action satisfies competing desires, how apparent sacrifices are actually investments in greater returns, how immediate costs produce long-term benefits that justify short-term discomfort. This multiplicity of advantages makes opposition more difficult because people would have to reject several things they want in order to resist one thing they dislike. The psychological cost of resistance becomes higher than the psychological cost of acceptance, but this level of influence cannot be achieved through techniques alone. It requires authentic understanding of human nature combined with genuine concern for people's welfare. The most dangerous individuals are those who have learned to merge personal ambition with sincere service to others. They are not pretending to care, they actually care, but their caring serves larger purposes. They genuinely want others to prosper, but only in ways that advance their own agenda. They sincerely seek win-win solutions, but they define winning according to their own criteria. Such people are nearly impossible to oppose because opposing them means opposing your own interests. They are difficult to replace because replacing them would diminish your own prospects. They are dangerous to betray because betraying them would damage your own future. This creates the ultimate expression of power, influence that people welcome rather than resist, control that feels like cooperation, authority that appears to be service. Those being influenced never feel manipulated because the manipulation serves their interests as well as the manipulator's interests. Achieving this level of sophistication requires thinking in longer time frames than most people consider. While others focus on immediate results, the master practitioner plants seeds that will bear fruit across decades. While others celebrate short-term victories, the strategic thinker builds foundations for permanent advantages. Every action creates precedents. Every decision establishes patterns. Every relationship forms part of a larger network that can be activated when circumstances require it. Nothing is wasted, nothing is accidental, nothing is left to chance. this systematic approach to power development requires patience that most people find unbearable. The temptation to act prematurely, to take shortcuts, to force outcomes before proper preparation has been completed, these impulses must be controlled completely, but patience without preparation is merely procrastination. True strategic patience involves using waiting time productively, gathering information, building capabilities, strengthening relationships, positioning resources. When the perfect moment finally arrives, action can be taken with overwhelming force and precision. The patient person sees opportunities that impatient people miss. The prepared person achieves outcomes that unprepared people cannot imagine. The strategic person creates advantages that tactical people never recognize until too late. This long-term perspective also applies to the most delicate aspect of power, reputation management. Reputation is not just what people say about you when you are present, but what they believe about you when you are absent. It is the expectation that precedes you into every room, the assumption that influences decisions in meetings you never attend. A strong reputation works continuously, even when you are not working. It creates opportunities you never pursue directly. It solves problems you never address personally. It influences outcomes in situations you never encounter directly. But reputation is also fragile and difficult to control because it exists in other people's minds rather than in your direct possession. Every promise becomes a test of credibility. Every commitment creates an opportunity for vindication or betrayal. Every threat must be backed by demonstrated willingness to follow through. This is why the wise person is extremely careful about what they commit to publicly. Never promise something you are not certain you can deliver. Never threaten something you are not prepared to do. Never guarantee something you cannot control. Your word must be more valuable than any contract, more binding than any legal document. When you do give your word, keep it regardless of how circumstances change, regardless of how difficult fulfillment becomes, regardless of what it costs personally. Because if you break your commitment once, people will remember. And they will wonder when you might break it again. The person whose word cannot be trusted has no real power, because power ultimately depends on the ability to make credible commitments. People must believe your promises before they will rely on your support. They must believe your warnings before they will respect your boundaries. They must trust your judgment before they will follow your guidance, but the individual whose word is absolutely reliable becomes powerful in ways that extend far beyond immediate capabilities. People make agreements based on handshakes. They invest in ventures based on recommendations. They avoid conflicts based on advice. They seek counsel on important decisions because they know they will hear the truth, even when truth is uncomfortable. This reliability creates a form of power that multiplies itself over time. Reliable people attract other reliable people. Quality recognizes quality. Excellence gravitates toward excellence. Eventually, you find yourself surrounded by the best individuals, involved in the most promising opportunities, consulted on the most important decisions, not because you demanded these things or took them by force, but because you earned them through consistent demonstration of worth over extended periods. This is sustainable power because it is based on value creation rather than value extraction. But with power comes responsibility that few people anticipate or understand. When others depend on you for their security, prosperity, and future, decisions become yours alone. Consequences become yours alone. The burden cannot be shared with those who look to you for strength and guidance. You must be the source of stability that others draw from, which means you cannot appear unstable. You must be the voice of confidence that others listen to, which means you cannot express doubt or fear. You must make difficult decisions that others cannot or will not make, which means accepting responsibility in isolation. This loneliness is the price of leadership. The higher you rise in power and responsibility, the fewer people there are who can understand the pressures you face, the complexity of decisions you must make, the weight of consequences that flow from your choices. People approach constantly, seeking favors, offering deals, requesting decisions, demanding answers. But they see only their narrow interests and immediate concerns. They cannot see the broader picture you must consider, the multiple constituencies you must balance, the long-term consequences you must weigh against short-term benefits, and you cannot explain everything to them. You cannot share complete reasoning or reveal all factors that influence decisions. Doing so would undermine confidence in your leadership, expose sensitive information that could be used against you, reveal weaknesses that enemies could exploit. So you decide alone. You carry the weight alone. You accept responsibility alone. This is the price of real power, paid daily without relief or respite, but this isolation also creates opportunity to make genuine difference in the world. To build something that matters. To create value that extends beyond your own existence. To leave behind legacy that improves lives long after you are gone. This is what separates true power from mere authority, real leadership from simple domination, lasting influence from temporary control. True power serves purposes larger than the person who wields it. Real leadership creates value for others, not just for the leader. Lasting influence builds something that continues benefiting people long after individual involvement ends. The choice every powerful person must make: will they use power primarily to serve themselves, or to serve something greater? Will they focus on what they can extract from their position, or what they can contribute through it? Will they build empire of fear that crumbles when they are gone, or create legacy of value that continues long after departure? The answer determines not just what they accomplish with power, but who they become as human beings. Character is the only thing that truly belongs to you, the only thing that cannot be taken by others, the only thing that determines real worth, but character under pressure reveals its true nature. Anyone can maintain principles when maintaining them costs nothing. Anyone can appear virtuous when virtue requires no sacrifice. Anyone can seem honorable when honor faces no tests. The measure of character comes in moments of crisis, when doing right conflicts with personal interest, when principle demands sacrifice of advantage, when integrity requires acceptance of loss. These moments cannot be predicted or prepared for through rehearsal. They arrive suddenly and demand immediate response that reveals who someone really is beneath all pretense and preparation. Most people fail these tests. Not because they are evil, but because they are weak. They tell themselves that compromise is practical, that flexibility shows wisdom, that survival justifies any decision. They rationalize their failures as necessary adaptations to circumstances beyond their control, but the person of true power understands that these moments of testing are not obstacles to overcome but opportunities to demonstrate the qualities that justify their position. Each time they choose principle over advantage, integrity over expedience, long-term reputation over short-term gain, they strengthen the foundation on which their power rests. This strength of character cannot be faked for extended periods. People may be deceived temporarily, but sustained observation reveals truth. Those who lack genuine principles eventually contradict themselves. Those who possess real character remain consistent across different situations and over extended time periods. This consistency becomes a form of power itself because people learn they can predict your behavior, trust your commitments, rely on your support. In a world where most individuals change their positions based on circumstances, the person who maintains consistent principles becomes a fixed point that others can navigate by. This reliability extends beyond personal relationships to institutional influence. Organizations, markets, entire industries begin to organize themselves around the assumption that certain principles will be maintained, that certain commitments will be honored, that certain patterns of behavior will continue. When this level of institutional influence has been achieved, power becomes almost automatic. Decisions flow naturally from established principles. Responses to new situations follow from known patterns. The need for constant negotiation and explanation disappears because everyone understands the framework within which decisions will be made, but this institutional power carries within it the greatest danger that any powerful person faces: the temptation to believe that they have transcended normal human limitations, that rules which apply to others do not apply to them, that their success proves their superiority rather than their responsibility. History is filled with examples of powerful individuals who destroyed themselves through this fundamental misunderstanding of what their power represented. They began to see their influence as evidence of their personal greatness rather than as a trust placed in them by circumstances, by others, by forces beyond their individual control. This hubris creates blindness to changing conditions, deafness to warning signals, insensitivity to the needs and concerns of those whose support sustains their position. They stop listening because they believe they already know everything important. They stop adapting because they believe their methods are perfect. They stop serving others because they believe others exist to serve them. The fall, when it comes, is always swift and complete. Because power that depends on personal greatness rather than mutual benefit has no foundation when greatness fails. When the illusion of superiority crumbles, there is nothing left to sustain the structure that was built upon it. The wise person never forgets that power is temporary, that success is fragile, that circumstances change constantly. They maintain humility not because they lack confidence, but because they understand that confidence without humility leads to overconfidence, and overconfidence leads to destruction. This humility manifests itself in continued learning, in constant questioning of assumptions, in regular examination of whether current methods still serve their intended purposes. The powerful person who stops growing intellectually and morally begins dying immediately. Even if the decay is not visible for years, the world changes constantly. Technology advances. Social attitudes evolve. Economic conditions shift. Political landscapes transform. The methods that produced success in previous conditions may produce failure in new circumstances. Only those who continue adapting survive and thrive across multiple generations of change, but adaptation cannot mean abandoning fundamental principles. Core values must remain constant even as methods evolve. The challenge is distinguishing between eternal truths that should never change and temporary tactics that must change regularly. This distinction requires wisdom that comes only through experience, through making mistakes and learning from them, through observing what endures and what disappears across long periods of time. It cannot be learned from books or taught in classrooms. It must be earned through living, through testing ideas against reality, Through accepting the consequences of both good and bad decisions, the person who develops this wisdom becomes truly dangerous because they combine the flexibility to adapt to changing circumstances with the stability of unchanging principles. They can evolve their methods without losing their identity. They can change their tactics without abandoning their strategy. They can modify their approach without compromising their integrity. This combination of adaptability and consistency creates the most powerful and most dangerous form of influence, power that appears to be natural, inevitable, even beneficial to those who might otherwise oppose it. It seems like the natural order of things rather than the result of human effort and planning. The choice is theirs. The moment is now. The consequences are permanent. They will act accordingly.